Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. As we get started, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the city of Vancouver, where I am joining you from, is situated on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Unceded means that Indigenous peoples that live and have lived on this land for over 10,000 years never signed away their homelands when Europeans began to settle here. My name is Jean, and I'm a librarian at the Vancouver Public Library. Before I hand things over to Les George, I want to go over a few things about this webinar format. First, we can't see or hear you. So that's myself and Les. If you are having any issues, please let us know in the chat. My colleague Grace is here as well, and she will be happy to help you troubleshoot any audio or video issues that you're having. There is time for questions at the end. Please, I know some of you have sent them in already. If you haven't, you can put those in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll pass them along to Les when we get to our Q&A session. So this session will be recorded, and the recording will be available in the next few weeks on VPL's YouTube channel. I also want to note that due to Zoom, the quality of the sound coming through is not as high as we would like it to be, and that there will be recordings of Les's drumming and singing on the VPL website later on. And so now I am so excited to introduce Les George, the 2023 Indigenous Storyteller in Residence at the library. Les George is a member of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, where he lives on the north shore of the Burrard Inlet. He is the grandson of the late Tsleil-Waututh Chief Dan George and connected through family to the Squamish and Musqueam nations. Les is a knowledge keeper and an experienced cultural guide and educator. He has chosen 4 interconnected themes for his residency at VPL, which are culture, teachings, family, and love. In his time at the library, he has offered programs for audiences of all ages. Today is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to learn from Les. And speaking for myself, I'm really grateful to be here today. And now it is my honor and pleasure to turn things over to Les George. Thank you.
Musqueam, thank you. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name's Les George. My father is from Squamish Nation. My mother, she's from Tsleil-Waututh, and I myself am Tsleil-Waututh. And if you haven't heard of Tsleil-Waututh before, I'll let you know that Tsleil-Waututh means people of the inlet. That's who I am. That's who my mother is. That's who my grandparents are, and so on. It goes on about 4 or 5 generations, if not more. And it's an honor to be telling stories, and it really fills my heart to tell stories to young ones, to young adults, and to elders. And last night I was with elders storytelling, and it really fills my heart to share my knowledge. And I am a knowledge keeper. And being a knowledge keeper, it doesn't just come to me in one day. I don't just get it from one person. And I gather my knowledge as years go on, and I'm still gathering knowledge to this day, and even tomorrow, and so on. So Tsleil-Waututh is about 15, 20 minutes away from Second Narrows Bridge, east. So when you come off the bridge, you take it east, and you go drive about 15 minutes, and you come to my village. Now I call it a village. If you were to Google Tsleil-Waututh, it would say IR3, which means Indian Reservation number 3. I myself prefer calling it a village because I live in the village. Right across the street from me is where my sister lives. I have 2 grown sons, and right up the hill, about 2 blocks, is where my oldest son lives. And down on Dollarton Highway is where my grandma used to live. So that's why I call it a village, because we're all family here. Now I've been storytelling for the last, I'd say about maybe 15 years, 20 years. And as mentioned, I worked in the school district for 23 years. I worked with Tsleil-Waututh School for about 1.5 years. And now I'm working with Vancouver Public Library for this season as a storyteller. And today I'm here to share with you one of our stories, legends. And when we tell these stories, as you can see, I don't have a book. And I've heard these stories hundreds of times from our elders, from other knowledge keepers, and also from some of our matriarchs, which is our women that are high, that we hold high. And one other thing I like to mention is when I'm saying Musqueam to you, I've heard there's different meanings for Musqueam. And when I'm saying Musqueam to you guys, I'm saying Musqueam out of respect for your ears and thanks and listening to the words that I say. Anytime you guys feel it in your heart or your mind, you're welcome to say Musqueam too. So before I start telling my story, I'd just like to go over a little bit about history. Now, what I know is the Tsleil-Waututh used to be 12 to 14,000 strong members all along the North Shore, and we occupied. I'm looking this way because the inlet is on this side of me. So we occupied the inlet as people of the inlet, and we lived on both sides. So we are living on the North Shore, about from Lions Gate all the way along the North Shore. We lived on the south side, which is Vancouver, and all the way through Vancouver. And if you keep going east, you'll get to Second Arrows Bridge, and it's still the North Shore on the north side, but on the south side, it turns into Burnaby. And I know that we occupied within the Burnaby area too. And if you keep going east, you'll get to the end of Dollarton, of the North Shore. The road ends. You'll be in Deep Cove. On the south side of Vancouver, you'll be out of Burnaby, and you'll start going along Barnett Highway and Port Moody. Now, there's also evidence that we lived in the Port Moody area too. So also in that area is Rocky Point, and we found evidence that we've been in there too. And with 12 to 14,000, we were spread out through all these areas that I'm talking about. If you keep going east, you'll get to another village site. That one is called Tumtumayatin. Tumtumayatin. Now, Tumtumayatin means where many people gather. And that was our winter village. And that's where we would gather in the wintertime. And the English name for that is Belcara Park. You guys know what I'm talking about? Musqueam. And I'll backtrack a little bit to one of our villages on the other side, on the North Shore. You can see Tumtumayatin from this park. This was our summer village, and we still use it today for summer festivities. This village I'm talking about is Wawachin. Wawachin. Wawachin means faces the wind. And that was our summer village where we go gather in the summertime. And we still do today, as I mentioned. And we're having one of our water sports festivals coming up, in which you guys are all invited on the second weekend of July, which is our war canoe races. And the English name for that is Kate's Park. Kate's Park. So that's located about 15, 20 minutes off of Second Arrows Bridge going east. Oh, see. So if you keep going east, past our summer village on the North Shore, past our winter village on the south side at Belcara Park, if you keep going east, you'll keep going past Bunsen Hydro House, and up from there is Bunsen Lake. And we too occupied these areas. And if you keep going east, you'll come across a bunch of little islands, like Raccoon Island, Twin Island, Jug Island, Granite Falls, and the Two-Headed Serpent Campground. And then you'll hit the very end to our salmon village in Tsleil-Waututh. in Tsleil-Waututh. Now, in Tsleil-Waututh was our salmon village. And Tsleil-Waututh relied 85 to 90% on the salmon. Musqueam. So today, I'd like to share a story with you. Oh, also, before I start the story, there's another thing I like to say, is that Tsleil-Waututh, I was told that when the tide is out, the table is set. And what that means is that when the tide went out, we would go out into the shore and we would harvest crabs, clams, oysters, mussels, and we would bring them back in, and we could either cook them right on the beach, have a feast on the beach, or we could bring them home and have them at home. We'll see you. So the story I'd like to share with you today, and when we tell stories, we tell them to recognize our loved ones in what I call the spirit world. Also, it's to teach lessons, to share stories, for entertainment, and also to recognize ones that are here today. Now, as I mentioned, I've heard this story numerous amount of times, and I have 2 grown sons now. They're young men, and I've shared this story with them a few times. So my sons know these stories, and I'm also proud to say that I'm a proud papa. I have a grandson now, and these stories that I'm going to share with you, I'm also going to share with him. So this story is about one of our great warriors, one of our great young men, one of our great chiefs. He was a young man, became a great warrior, became a great chief. His name was Waututh. Waututh. Now Waututh, he had a really big heart, and he had love and care for everybody. And what I mean by that is that when he walked these lands, he was a keeper of the land. And what I mean by that is he maintained the lands that I just talked about. He made sure that all these lands were taken care of. He made sure that that everyone, the Tsleil-Waututh, was all taken care of too. Now Waututh, when he would wake up in the morning, and it was sunny like today, he would give thanks. Thanks for the sun. Thanks for today. On days like a few weeks ago, when it was raining really heavy, he would also give thanks for days like that. He'd come out and he'd give thanks. Thanks to the rain. Thanks for today. On days like a few months ago, when it was snowing, when we had snow back in January, February, he would be thankful for that. Thank you for the snow. Thank you for today. Musqueam, Musqueam. When he would wake up in the morning, he'd wake up and he would sing this song. Wanina, wanina, ai, ai, wanina, ai, ai, wanina, ai, ai. And that's who Waututh was. Now Waututh, as I mentioned, had a really big heart. He loved everybody and he cared for everybody and he maintained the lands. Now when he came across babies and they were crying, he would hold the baby and the baby would stop crying. When he came to munmuns is the Squamish word for children. Now when he come across them, he would embrace them and rub their back or pat them on the head and give thanks to them, and they would be happy. They would run away all happy. If he came across teenagers, if he seen what they're doing is a little bit wrong, he would give them the proper teachings and the proper protocols on what to do and how to do it and what to do next. And that's who Waututh was. When he came across young adults, he gave them advice. They would listen to him. They would listen to his words. They would listen to his teachings. Now Waututh, in our teachings and traditions, we take care of our elders. Our elders come first. That's the way the First Nations do what we do. Now, Waututh had these teachings too, and he had a lot of respect for the elders. But they too knew who Waututh was, and they listened to his words when he would say them. That's just who Waututh was, with his big heart. He would share all his teachings. He would share all his knowledge, all ages. That's who Waututh was. Now, Waututh, he also had some special powers. I'm not talking about powers like Superman or Spider-Man. I'm talking powers of communication. I don't mean like I'm talking to you right now. I mean, you have powers, the four-leggeds. You guys know any four-leggeds? Oh, see, talking about like the wolf, the elk, the bear, the deer. And I don't mean communication like I'm talking to you right now. I mean, he'd be walking down a trail. He would come across a creek. He would go to cross it, and then all of a sudden the deer would startle, look up as it was drinking water. He would be scared. And Waututh would get a little bit startled too. And he would see that it was a deer. If it had horns, he would say, "Good morning, brother." If it didn't have the horns, he would say, "Good morning, sister." The deer would kind of give a nod. It'd start drinking water again. And Waututh would carry on his way down the trail. He'd be walking a trail, and there'd be a trail parallel to it. And they'd both be going the same direction. And there would be a bear up on this trail, and Waututh on this trail. And the bear would see Waututh. Waututh would see the bear. But they both knew that they weren't there to harm each other. They would both carry on their ways, almost walking together. That's who Waututh was. Now these powers carry beyond the four-leggeds, carries on to the winged ones. Do you guys know any winged ones? Oh, see them. Oh, see them. Talking about the eagles, ravens, the hawks, the chickadees, all the way down to the little hummingbirds. He'd be walking along trails, and he would look up and he would see the eagle. He'd say hello, give thanks. And the eagle would be flying down, looking at him, while soaring around in circles above Waututh. Little chickadees would fly around him and almost land on his shoulder. And he would say hello to them too. Morning. And hummingbirds would buzz around his head. He would give thanks for the hummingbird. That's who Waututh was. Now those powers, they carried on into the water. The finned ones. You guys know any finned ones? Oh, see them. I'm talking about the salmon, the seals, the yo-yotes. Yo-yotes, Squamish, is killer whale. Now, when Waututh was in the water, we were all to Tsleil-Waututh. We were canoeing in the water. We'd look over and we would see Waututh's canoe. There'd be seals popping their heads out right beside Waututh, where you could almost touch them and pet them. There'd be salmon splashing around him. Those are the powers that I'm talking that Waututh had. All of the Tsleil-Waututh knew that he had these powers. Now, as I mentioned, with these powers that Waututh had came responsibility. And when he'd see certain birds come out in a certain season, he would know that there was going to be a early harvest for berries or for some of our special medicines that we use in the forest. And he would let you know that these medicines are coming, that these berries are coming. Get your baskets. Get ready to start harvesting. They would listen to Waututh, and they would get ready, and they'd go get their harvest. He also knew when the salmon were coming. So he would let you know if we were all to Tsleil-Waututh here. He would let you know salmon are coming. Go get your nets. Get up to Tsleil-Waututh. Go get in your canoe. Make it up to Tsleil-Waututh. Grab your family. Let's go. Go grab your nets, your hooks. Let's get up to Tsleil-Waututh. And they would listen to Waututh because they knew who Waututh was. Now, if you've ever been down to Waututh, to Kate's Park, you'll know where I'm talking about. There's a point out there where you can go down. When you're at this point, you look west. You can see downtown Vancouver and lots of the North Shore from that point. If you look east, you can see all the way up Indian Arm. As far as the eye and the water can see, to see that far. Now Waututh, he would go down, he would sit down there for hours, sometimes days, to make sure that all the Tsleil-Wautuths would go by, get their harvest of salmon for the season. Because as I mentioned, salmon was 85 to 90% of our diet. And he would sit there and he would wait for you to go by with your family in your canoe. He would share this song. Juanina, Juanina, hi, hi. Juanina, hi, hi. Juanina, hi, hi, hi. So Waututh, he would stay there until most of the families in Tsleil-Waututh would go by. And as they would go by, he would get in his canoe. He would start making his way up to Tsleil-Waututh. Now, Tsleil-Waututh is as far as you can go to the end of the inlet. It's where the fresh water meets the salt water. And that's where the salmon go to spawn. So that's where we would go to get our harvest. Now, I've been up there myself. I've been there a few times. I've been there in the summertime. And in the summertime, when I've been there, the water is so refreshing, so nice and cool, you can stay in there for hours. But I've also been there during the salmon season. And our salmon season is late September, October, and November. And the water is really cold. And I've been there then too. When I've been there, that water is no longer clear. It's as black. It's as black as my glasses right here. And the reason why, because there's so many salmon in there that if they weren't so slippery, you can walk across their backs to get across the river. That's how many salmon are in there. So that's why we went up there in Tsleil-Waututh to harvest their salmon. Now when he made his way up there, he got up there and he looked and he seen these two boys. When he seen these two boys, they're grabbing rocks the size of their hands. They seen these salmon and they were throwing them down, knocking these salmon dead. They're grabbing rocks the size of both of their heads, boulders, little boulders, throwing them out, squashing the salmon, and are knocking them onto the shore. He would die. Now Waututh seen this when he came up in his canoe. And he seen these two boys. And he told them that these aren't our ways. That this isn't how we treat the salmon. That our teachings are stronger than this. And the two boys kind of just laughed at him and agreed and ran off the trails. Now Waututh, he would always be the first to wake in the morning. Next morning, he awoke, and instead of going in his canoe, he took the trail and he walked down the trail to look for any Tsleil-Wautuths that were left behind. Now the same two boys woke up and they seen Waututh's canoe on the beach, and they're like, "Oh, he's still sleeping. Let's go take a look at the salmon." So they went down there, and sure enough, all the salmon were still in there. This time, they broke trees from the branches. One of the boys was took it as a golf club. He's golfing them out. Knocking the salmon dead. The other boy, he was scooping them up. Baseball batting them out of the park. Now watch it. He came out of the trail. You see these boys, the same two boys, doing what they're doing. He's like, I told you boys, that this is how we treat the salmon. That these aren't our ways. That these aren't our teachings. So he walked into the water, waist deep. He started singing. Wadi na, wadi na, hai hai, wadi na, hai hai, wadi na, hai hai, hai hai. And by the time Watson finished singing his song, the salmon had left out of the river back into the salt water. Now the rest of the Tsleil-Wautuths, they came down and they seen how clear the river was. And they knew of Waututh's powers and they could see the salmon bubbling in the salt water, but not enough to get them with our nets, our spears, or our hooks. And they turned to Waututh. They said, why'd you do this? Why'd you make the salmon leave? And Waututh told them, I didn't tell the salmon to leave. I told them what those two boys were doing to them. They left on their own. Now that night, and I've seen these markings. I've been up to it in Tsleil-Waututh, and I've seen the markings of the big house up there, of where the big house posts were. So it was a really long big house. So that night, they took these boys. Each Tsleil-Waututh family had a member, and this goes for my nation to Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Musqueam. And I've been to a lot of other villages throughout BC, throughout Canada, and even some throughout the US. And I'm not even going to say villages. I'm not going to even say communities. I'm going to even say schools. That saying goes, it takes a whole community or a whole village to raise a child. We truly believe in that in our heart and in our mind. And there's another word for that too. One heart, one mind. That word is not samat. Not samat. Not samat means one heart, one mind. And it took all the rest of the Tsleil-Waututh. They took these boys in. They weren't mad at them. They were just telling them our teachings that have been passed on for thousands of years. They gave them these teachings, these protocols, and the importance of the salmon and how much we rely on the harvest to get us through the winter. And in their heart and their mind, these boys got it. They understood the importance of the salmon. So that night, they went into the longhouse. They stood up in front of hundreds, maybe thousands of Tsleil-Wautuths in the big house. And they knew what they had to do. So they understood. They felt scared. They felt nervous. But they knew in their heart they had to say what was on their mind. So they stood up in front of everybody. And they said, we're sorry for what we have done. We know what we have done is wrong. We won't let it happen again. Now there were Tsleil-Wautuths there from each family. And they stood up. They said, it's not us. We need to apologize to you. So they turned to Waututh and they said, we're sorry for what we have done. We know what we have done is wrong. And we won't let it happen again. And Waututh told them, it's not me you need to apologize to. You know who they need to apologize to? Musqueam, the salmon. Now in my family, I have one of these. Now this is medicine for my people and for many other villages throughout Canada, throughout BC, and throughout the lower mainland. you'll see a lot of First Nations with drums. The drums, they have a lot of power to them, a lot of medicine. It gives people mixed feelings when the drum is played. And when you get those feelings inside, it builds up and it comes out. Those feelings are different for everybody. So in my family, I have a drum. Both my sons have a drum, and now my grandson has a drum, and he's learning to play it. He's going to learn these songs one day too. So that next morning, those boys, they knew who they need to apologize to, the salmon. So those boys, they walked down the river too, and they had their drums. They had their own drums too. They walked into the water, waist deep. They started singing this song. Wanina, wanina, ay, ay. Wanina, ay, ay. Wanina, ay, 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 ay. And by the time those boys finished singing their song, the salmon come back up into the river so that the rest of the Tsleil-Waututh could get their harvest for the winter time. Musqueam, I thank you for listening to my story and for the words that I shared with you. Musqueam.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your stories with us today. If you are ready, I would like to ask you a few questions that have been shared with us.
Yes.
Can I ask one of my own first?
Yes.
Could you tell us about your rattle?
Oh, my rattle? Yep. This
Yeah.
rattle was gifted to me. And this is the hide. In our traditions, we like to use every part of the body that we use to hunt. So I believe this is elk hide, and this is called sinew right here, which is like the very thin parts of the skin, and we dry it out, and then the wood, and then we just put some rice in there. This one was gifted to me, and then it was also tanned on one side. So beef on one side. Oh, see you.
Thank you. So one of the questions that I have from the folks that are here with us today is how did you learn to tell stories?
I learned when I was growing up, I learned from one of my late uncles, who was Chief Dan George's youngest son, Leonard George. I used to go perform with him. Him, my mother, who unfortunately what I call the spirit world, that's where my mother is now, and my uncle Len. They were really close friends, and my mom got me to get up and dance one day. Excuse me. My mother got me to get up and dance one day, and I just ended up becoming a Children of Takaya performer. So I heard these stories over and over again, and I'm sure that my two sons have heard these stories over and over again. So all these stories are put into my mind and in my heart. As you can see, I don't have a book, so that's part of our teachings is oral storytelling. We'll see.
So I have a question in the chat. One of the classes would like to learn more about your drum. They haven't seen a drum like it before.
Oh, okay. This drum I got from one of our drum makers. Oh, sorry, I gotta grab my drum. I got from one of our drum makers. We call him a keeper of the drum. He knows how to do these back here. He knows how to do all that. And we do trades. And I do like storytelling or dancing, performing with him. And I trade off with him for a drum. And on this drum, says the chalma. The chalma. It's the same as almost the same as one heart, one mind, but this one means together as one. And as you can see, Tsleil-Waututh, as I mentioned, means people of the inlet. And if you can see right here, this is a canoe. There's the front of the canoe, and there's the back of the canoe. And then the sun, and then crabby, because sometimes I get a little bit crabby. So just a little crab. Oh, see you.
Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful, beautiful drum, and your singing and your stories.
Oh, see you.
One of the questions from our audience is, what is it like being the grandson of a chief, and what did your grandfather do while he was chief?
My grandfather, late Chief Dan George, he's actually my great grandfather. But I've met him a few times, and I never said, "Hey, great grandfather." I'd always say, "Hey, grandpa." And he knew that. I knew that. My mom knew that. And the way that works is my grandma was the oldest granddaughter of Chief Dan George. She was the second oldest. And my grandmother had 10 children, 5 daughters, 5 sons. My mom was the oldest. So the things that he did is he was in Hollywood movies, he was in TV series, and he was a poet. So he has a couple of books out with poetry in it. And also, he was what we call a footstep for First Nations people. Because one of the things that he did that is very, that a lot of people can remember is what they call the Centennial Speech on Canada Day. He did that at Empire Stadium. That can also be YouTubed on the computer. And as I say, I met him a few times, and I felt really honored. And I felt the presence of when he was there. And one of the things I like to share, my grandma, being the oldest daughter, my grandfather would choose to stay there. So he would stay at her house. People would gather, and we'd all be talking. We'd all be talking away to each other. And when my grandpa came in the room, there was silence. Those were the powers that my grandpa had. We'll see you. I can hear.
What do you enjoy about storytelling?
I just enjoy sharing what I know. I like my mother is what I call a keeper of the children, and she had a background in early childhood education. She was a teacher, and she also became a coordinator in teaching young adults how to deal with children and stuff. And that some of her blood runs through my blood. When I'm storytelling, I like to see the faces of people when I'm telling the stories, and I like to see their reactions, and it makes my heart feel good. We'll see.
So you mentioned that the story you shared, some of the stories that you tell are stories that you've been hearing and hearing and hearing for a long time since you were young. And one of the questions here is about whether you have stories that you are the first person to ever tell, or if and what the balance of that is.
There is a story.
Yes.
I heard a lot of stories. I have a lot of stories, and there was actually I got challenged in high school to write a story, and the story I wrote was Caleb, and it's a little bit about residential school, and a little bit about bullying, and that's the story that I wrote, and that's the name that I gave my oldest son, was Caleb. And the moral of that story is that nobody is perfect, that we're all equal in one way or another, and that Caleb means to be free. Oh, see you.
So one of the questions here is about why oral storytelling is so important, and why is it important to value the stories that have been passed down kind of orally?
I think that's one of our teachings that's been going on for thousands of years. It's all storytelling. And it's going to continue to go on as long as myself and other knowledge keepers keep passing them on. Now, I know, as I mentioned, that I've heard these stories, I'd say over 100 times. That's where my sons are starting to get to hear these stories over hundreds of times. And I have lots of nieces and nephews that like to hear the stories all the time too. We'll see.
How old is your grandson?
He's going to be 1 on June 9th. And he knows how to play the drum. I've seen him.
Oh, that's so lovely. One of the groups here would love to hear any plant stories you have.
Any plant stories I have?
Hmm.
Just my own personal plant stories. I know that right now is the season of what we call saskies. Sasky. Now, sasky, it's kind of tastes like a little bit like celery, but a little bit sweeter. And it's actually the stalk of the salmonberry. So before the salmonberries start coming, saskies grow out, and you pick them from the bottom, and then you peel the orange off, and then you can eat the inside. It looks like celery too, but it's solid, yeah, more solid. It doesn't have the U shape, it has a circular shape. So that's sasky. And I know cedar is one of our big medicines. And we use cedar for many things, and it's also used as medicine. Oh, see.
I have a question here about wolves. Do you have any wolf stories, and how do we say wolf properly?
Wolf is very has a really strong importance to my people, Tsleil-Waututh people, and the wolf, we believe, saved some of our people. We have a recreation story about the wolf, and wolf in our language is Takaya, Takaya. And if you ever come to my village, you'll know you're in my village because you'll see the wolf. It's just right over my shoulder here, and he'll be playing the drum on one knee. He'll be on one knee and he'll be holding the drum, looking up to the drum. That's when you'll know you're in my village because you'll see that banner on every street light through our whole village. So that's the importance of the wolf, Takaya in our language. Oh, see.
Do you have a favorite instrument to play?
My favorite instrument is the drum. It has a lot of powers, and there's songs that I've sung, and there's songs that I can't sing. I know them, but I'm not allowed to sing them. That's the way our tradition goes, and that's the way it is with certain families. Certain families have songs that I can't sing, and my family has certain songs that we can't sing, and that other families can't sing. But when I go to different nations, like on the island or up in the interior, there's songs that they sing that really I take it to the heart. I can really feel the drum in those ones. So that's why the drum's one of my favorites. Awesome.
Is there anything that you would want to share with newcomers about your culture?
Yeah, there's some things I'd like to share. I always like to share that before reconciliation comes one other thing: truth. I like the truth to be out there about who we are, where we come from, and what we went through. Awesome.
So a question here about the ways, like how have you led your community, and how have you led your community?
How have I led?
Or have you led your community?
I've been out there. I've represented. When we have marches, here in our community, and I lead by opening up with a song and drum. And also, I've gone into classes and done storytelling. We have our own school here in Tsleil-Waututh. So we have K to 12 I've gone in there and I've led Tsleil-Waututh games. I've done storytelling, and I've done drumming and singing with them. We'll see.
I have a question here that kind of coming off of your rattle and your drum,
Yeah.
that asks about the importance of using all parts of the animal. So you mentioned when you were talking about the rattle, using all parts of the animal. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Just a second, I'll grab my rattle. So and I've done this for my mother. My mother, as I mentioned, is in the spirit world, and we went did a hunting trip to do a memorial for her. And when we hunted, we offer up tobacco as part of our teachings. The tobacco, and for the rattle, as you can see, the hide here, and we need to make two little pieces, and we need to sew them together all the way around and down. And as I mentioned, this little part right here is another part of the skin, the sinew. And when we were hunting, we hunted deer and moose. And as you know, we took the male moose. And when with their horns, we use those for ceremony to pick up hot rocks, or when we're cooking. Sometimes when we cook over open fire, we need to lift that pot. We use those for ceremony. We use those. The antlers can also be used for like whistles and flutes, and the hides can be used for drums and rattles, and also for the fur can be used for ceremony. Awesome.
Thank you. And then I have a question here. It says, if there's time, and there is, would you be interested in playing us another song or singing us another
Sure.
song?
Yeah.
Thank you.
This one, as I mentioned, if you're ever in my village, you'll see, what's the word that I said? Takaya. Takaya means wolf in our language. So that's the song I'd like to share with you. This is our clan song. This is a song that we sing to represent our nation. Tsleil-Waututh, wolf, Takaya. Ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, ho, below, ho, ho, below, oh, below, hey.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one or two more questions.
Okay.
I do want to share that there are lots of thanks in the chat for you. Thank you for sharing your stories, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and your drumming. I have a question here that asks whether you've traveled to other countries and shared teachings from Tsleil-Waututh Nation there.
I would have to say yes and no. No, I haven't traveled to other countries. But yes, I've had a lot of countries come to me. And saying that, I'm also a cultural guide for our well-known, internationally known Takaya Tours, canoe group. And what we do is we give a 2-hour tour of our inlet. We meet at Waututh, Gates Park, and we do half hour of dry land protocol and teachings. I do a welcome, and then I go out in the water on the canoe for an hour and a half, and I share history, I share stories, and I share songs. And I've done it with people from Japan, from Germany, from all across Canada, and I've done it with doctors and lawyers. Lawyers have come on the tours, and just a lot of people throughout Canada. So I've given a lot of tours to people throughout the world. We'll see you.
Thank you. And last but not least, if folks were inspired today and want to hear more of your storytelling, how do they do that?
I believe they can go on the website through the library.
Yeah, they can. They can absolutely do that.
Yeah.
And then, is there
Or
anything
they
else
can
you want to?
get my email from Andrew or Jonah.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything else you'd like to say to close off your time here with us before I thank you? And
Just like to acknowledge everybody who's listened to my words today. I raise my hand. When we raise our hands, we raise it out of respect and thanks. And I thank you guys for listening to the words that I say. And it really fills my heart knowing that there's a lot of people listening to the words that I share, the stories that I tell. I say, Musqueam.
Musqueam, thank you so much for being with us today, Les, and for sharing your wisdom and your teachings and your stories and your songs. It's truly been an honor to be here with you. Thank you.